Allow me to introduce Joanna Seddon. She's with Prescient, but you may know her from many things. Most recently, she's been a principal and global partner brand consulting at Ogilvy. She's been involved with many different businesses in the realm of financial value of brands, which is what we're going to talk about because we want to cover that history. She was behind the Brand Z rating, which all of us have made reference to over time. And she's one of those people who, as I do a little digging here and there behind lots of good things that have happened historically in the marketing accountability space, quite often I find that Joanna has been a part of them. A couple things that I think probably are not as well known. One, the brand in the boardroom was really a foundational piece, I think, for MASB. I know that Meg Blair was always making reference to that while she was still alive and talking about things that were really the basis of what we were doing. And Joanna was involved with that, and I think to very good end. And as you'll hear in our conversation, the whole notion of financial value of brand was really kind of part of that discussion. She also did something which she, I think, is too modest about, which I think is really important. And that's that she, reinvented the Marketing Hall of Fame. And it's, people say that marketers love to pat themselves on the back, and perhaps there's some truth to that. But in my view, it's important to give recognition to the folks who have really done an outstanding job to advance the field of marketing. And, I was happily surprised to learn that one of the initial honorees was actually Apple, and Steve Jobs himself thought it was so valuable that he became involved in the whole process because he thought that was a real mark of distinction for them. Joanna is a past president of AMA New York, which is behind many good initiatives, including the Marketing Hall of Fame and the Effie Awards. She's an active member of the ANA 4As and MASB. She's got her doctorate from Oxford, and she also lectures on the financial value brands at the Columbia Business School. So Joanna, thanks for joining us today, and look forward to our conversation. As you and I were preparing for this, I was reminiscing about conversations in the new business team at Young and Rubicam probably 35 years ago with regard to, when we're making these presentations, we need to talk about the long-term value that we're providing by building these assets that are called brands. And that, I wasn't directly involved in this going forward, but that led to the whole development of the brand asset valuator, which was something that Y&R was pretty early on, although I think Interbrand was also there at that time. Perhaps you can take me back to those early days of different firms coming up with their methodologies and share some thoughts about what the objectives were back then.
I think the origin of it, my entry into measuring the financial value of brands and measuring the value of brands really dates back to a little bit later than some of this, which is around 2000. But it's important because it allows me to give you the perspective from which, I started to look at measuring brands, how it should be done, and brand valuation. And at that time, I was one of the founding partners of Future Brand, and we had a major client called Telefonica, the Spanish telecoms company in Madrid. And we had done a beautiful new positioning of the brand, new brand identity. It was about to be rolled out in Brazil. And then the board, which was composed of, Spanish banks, stopped it and said, well, what's the ROI on this? Why are we spending millions and millions of dollars repainting our trucks? And at that time they had phone booths, yeah. And we had no answer. And I've been thinking about measurements. So everybody came to me and said, help, Joanna, you have to come up with something. And this really precipitated it. But you can see that there was a reason for thinking about measuring the value that brands add to the business. So this is the sort of strong viewpoint and perspective from which, I've always looked at the history of brand measurement in general and brand valuation in particular, is that it should be useful. It should serve a purpose. It's not just, a point in time number. If you look at that, so what I did at that point was look around and say, how have people measured the value of brands? And you could see that there were really two main streams of it. One was market research. Now, market research is extremely important because you need to understand it's an essential ingredient, often not delivered essentially enough, in my view, into the measurement of brands. Because if it's customers and potential customers who understand, in whose heads, right, the brand memories exist, which lead them to choose one product over another, and therefore to create incremental revenues, profits, and sustainable competitive advantage. So it's important, but on itself, market research, it's great for market researchers. It can be great for marketers. But when you get up to talking, where's my marketing budget with the CEO, let alone CFOs and boards, it's a problem. It doesn't go far enough. It doesn't deliver on accountability for the brand as an asset the way accountability is generally delivered for other assets of the company. So, brand measurement should treat the brand as an asset, something to be invested in, put to work to generate value, and held accountable for the results. So market research is an ingredient, but not enough. And then the other bit was, at that point, there were always people around focusing on the value of brands. Ask any accountant, they'd give you a financial value. And that has been the Achilles heel, if you like, of brand valuation. It dates back to the origins, which was in acquisition accounting. It was actually in the UK with Hovis McDougall, which is a bread brand, which managed successfully to defend itself against hostile takeovers, because some bright spark of an investment banker said, well, they're saying that our price is too high and people are paying too much, especially for consumer packaged goods companies. And we all know it's about the brand, but we can't measure it. And so he said, let's value it, take it out of goodwill and put it on the balance sheet. And that was a good thing, because it sends a signal that brands have value. It was also a bad thing because it led brand valuation to get stuck for too long into the accounting function and financial function, and in the point in time measurement rather than the use, what's brand valuation useful for function.
If I recall our conversation correctly about the accounting methodologies evaluation, a reasonably well-known firm just took a percentage of cash flow and ascribed that to the brand value. Would you care to confirm and expand upon that?
Yeah, well, to my horror, and it continues today, you see, accountants, when they're valuing a brand that's been acquired to put on the balance sheet, they just want a number. They don't care about anything else. They're thinking about saving money on taxes in this case. And they don't really care how they come to it, and they don't think brands are worth very much. So this particular firm, I know well that I've been on the other side of the table in negotiations from them, which is where this came out, has a standard rule. It's known actually in the accounting profession, though there are different versions of it, as rule of thumb. What that means is you take a portion of operating profits. In the example I was quoting Tony, one of the big four actually, they say, no matter what the brand is, no matter what the business is, no matter what geography it's in, let's attribute 25% of operating profit to brand. There you are, done. Yeah. So that gives you an idea of the problems that not being used from a brand perspective, but being used from a finance or tax perspective, the kind of hole it dug for brand valuation. It also set up a lot of problems because due to lack of confusion between the marketing department and the lack of communication between the marketing department and the finance department, often the finance people didn't bother to tell the marketers that they put the brand on the balance sheet. So meanwhile, HP's acquisition of Compaq was a great and famous case for that. HP bought Compaq. The finance guys saved a lot of money by sticking it on the balance sheet. Meanwhile, the marketing guys, without talking to the finance department, decided to get rid of the Compaq brand. Huge impairment charges. This was all in Europe because it wasn't legal in the States then. Lawsuits, it cost them millions and millions of dollars. So, clearly a point in time, a number is good because it sends a signal for the fact that brands have value. But if you just have a number, well, numbers change every day. You can't do much with a number. So, looking at it from, these two streams in which measurement of brands evolved, the answer, I think that, the people who are really serious about this, not just me, but also, the other best practitioners came to was, well, you need to put the two together and you need to understand what proportion of financial value can reasonably be attributed to brand, and then try and identify the levers to pull so you can grow the value that brand and marketing, and actually behind that customer experience, it's much, much bigger than marketing, add to the business. So that's kind of like the litmus test for looking at the evolution. And brand valuation is hopelessly under-leveraged. It's still too stuck on a point in time, on a number. It's about the what when it should be about the how. The best methodologies look at the levers so you can start to identify how brand drives value in the business. But none of them go far enough. You look at running scenarios. So I think one of the missions that I have is to say that if we could really understand, which you can, to a quite good enough point, the levers through which brand drives value, identify opportunities for whether it's level of investment, whether it's brand strategy, whether it's investment in other parts of the business, particularly the experience. Which levers should we pull? How can we manage our brands better to drive incremental revenues, profits, and business value for the business? And that's the litmus test. So that's what best practices are aiming at. If you do that, I think you can really transform marketing by placing it on an equal footing with the other functions of the company. Without that, brand valuation, I actually hesitate very often to use the term brand valuation because people associate it with a number and with a ranking. And rankings are another aspect.
You were the one who you helped develop that with that Brand Z thing, didn't you?
It was all my idea because Interbrand had one, and before that I was at Futurebrand, and I have principles about doing rankings, which is I won't do them just on financial data. I also have to have data about the strength of the brands, which you can splice into it. Futurebrand we sold to IPG, so they didn't have any market research databases at all, so we couldn't do it. But the minute I was recruited by WPP, I went to the former CEO Martin Sorrell and said, "You've got this Brand Z study lying around. It's very large, and you're not doing much with it. How about I take it and make it into a ranking?" And he said, "I've been asking various other agencies I have to do this for years, and they don't know how." And that included BAV, by the way. And Y&R, yeah. They tried, but they couldn't make it work.
Well, to your point, they were always averse to putting a number out there because they didn't think it would withstand scrutiny.
Well, and I think there's two aspects to that. One is, having worked a lot with BAV and the data, the way in which it's constructed, it's beautiful, it's brilliantly simple, but it's constructed more from a planner and attributes point of view. And they've tried with various professors and God knows what, they've asked me, but you can't really easily link it to financial value. We have, but we've taken the BAV data and kind of funneled it through some of the brand Z constructs so that we can do it. You can't. So one is they can't because the way it's put together. The other one is that it is wrong, in my view, to be too precious about how accurate the valuation of a brand is. It doesn't mean I'm in favor of inaccuracy, but it means that brand valuation should be a strategic tool. It's for relative measurement of how your brand is doing, and it is for understanding how you can leverage your brand better. It's not something you want to plug into your financial accounting system, which is what a lot of accountants always want to do to it. And even if you were doing that, you've heard the way that some of the accounting firms value brands. I would argue against anybody, and I've had big arguments with many CFOs on this, is that the way we do brand valuation, the secret is to make the brand research inputs, the equity data on the brand, as robust as we can. And I will stand up against any CFO and say, our brand equity measurement data is more robust than your financial projections, which is what you do, the financial part on. How everybody knows how financial budgets are done. It's a finger in the air. It's a hockey stick. It's how do I get my budget in next year? So I would argue that to think that you have to be completely accurate, financials are not accurate. You can be absolutely you should try and be as robust as you can. That would be my answer to that one. Yeah.
So we've been talking a little bit about the terminology here, and when we did the survey with the ANA, the survey was on brand value as expressed in financial or monetary terms. But we essentially got false positives about companies saying that they measured that, because when they heard brand value, they meant more attitudinal kind of data and more tracking kind of data than they meant a number. So we evolved from that to say, let's talk about financial value of brand. As I mentioned to you the other day, the pushback from some of the international community is they'd rather use monetary brand value. Do you have any perspective on that terminology in terms of clarity, both in North America and around the world?
I definitely have a point of view on that, yes. So I would agree that brand value is a problem, because the term, like many other things like brand architecture, brand strategies, totally, they're what do they actually mean? Everybody uses them differently. And brand value is very often confused with, brand health tracking, or, some kind of old market research methodologies. So brand value on its own isn't enough. Monetary value, it doesn't sound like leveraging the immense power of brands to create financial value for businesses. Brand financial value is better. I actually think it's a good question. That's the best there is. Do I think it's enough? No, because what I find with clients is if you use the term brand valuation, they automatically go back to rankings of numbers, and they don't think about it. They think about it as something apart, not something useful. So I tend to dodge it and try and say, I confess, and try and say, well, you can have your brand strategy, based on, research and a bit of analysis, or just our experience and expertise, or you can have it linked to financial numbers, so we can run scenarios and we can say what brand and marketing investment and innovation investment strategy, which we're increasingly using brand valuation for, which one will add the most value to your business and what should you do? And they will always say, oh, linking my brand to financials, I like that. And that's where I tend to go, simply because those words, brand valuation is too financy and useless in their minds. Brand value is too brand health tracking-ish. Brand monetary value to me just sounds weird and foreign and too finance again. So I think it's a problem to be solved. Yeah.
Okay.
Any suggestions? Welcome.
Well, that's why we're financial value of brands in terms of the
Yeah.
convention that we're using, at least right now. So.